Do you manage your own household finances differently, having gone through all of this experience?
That is so funny that you asked me. I think you're the first person to ever ask me about my own finances at home. The truth be said, I am the controller for the state of Illinois, and David Shostak is the controller for our family. He is amazing. My husband is incredible. And if it weren't for this partnership that we have, where he's like fully supportive and I don't have to worry about looking at our personal finances because he has them completely under control.
Welcome to Czubernat Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Czubernat. Today, I'm sitting down with Illinois Comptroller Susana Mendoza. We actually spent a lot of time talking about things you wouldn't expect, like her recent trip to Poland. But we also got into the reality of her job, the common sense of managing a state budget like a household, and what it was like to walk into an office on day one. This isn't a political speech. It's a look at the person behind the state's checkbook. Here's my conversation with Susana Mendoza. I want to start with something personal. You recently traveled to Poland.
I did.
How was that?
Wow, it was amazing. It was really the trip of a lifetime because I didn't just travel to Poland by myself, but I traveled with my 12-year-old son, my husband, so David's father, who's also named David. So I call him David, and our son we call David. He's 12 years old. The most important part of this trip was that we were able to take David's parents, Helene and Edward Shostak.
A Polish last name.
Yes, very Polish last name. They, as a matter of fact, had a DNA test done. Have you ever had a DNA test done?
Yes, but for different purposes, not for Ancestry.
Oh, okay. So they had an Ancestry DNA test done. And no joke, my father-in-law came back 99% from the Highlander region.
Really? From Podhale?
Yes. My mother-in-law came back with 98% Polish from that region, right? Southern Poland. And I thought, I don't know that I've ever met anybody that has that much of one place. Because if you talk to anybody who's had one of these Ancestry DNA, they're like, they find out that they're from a whole bunch of different places.
Yes,
they had
it's all
no
over
idea.
the place.
We're like mutts, but people, right? And they're like, I'm very Italian. And it turns out you're not even Italian, right? You're like three other things. So in this case, my in-laws have always said they're Polish. They were born in the United States, both Edward and Helene. Edward, my father-in-law, just turned 88. My mother is 84. She'll be 85 in December. Mother-in-law, I should say. And they both knew that they were Polish, but they'd never been to Poland.
So that was their first time?
Their first time ever. As a matter of fact, it's their first time out of the United States, other than when they've gone on vacation with my husband, our son, and me to Mexico, to like a resort, right? But that's almost like being in America, right? They've never left North America. And they raised 9 kids. My father-in-law was a union electrician who raised 9 kids on that salary. My mother-in-law was a stay-at-home mom, of course, because with 9 children, right? It's tough. Her first 4 kids were each exactly a year apart. In fact, 2 of them were the exact same birthday, just on a different year.
Really?
Yes.
They did it on purpose?
Can you imagine? And then there was a 4-year pause between the youngest of the oldest and then my husband, David. And then there was another 4-year pause between David and the oldest of the youngest. And then the next one, so that would have been 4 or 5. Yeah, he was number 5. The other 4 were exactly a year apart, 2 of them 10 months apart. So it was like bam, 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 then a break, then another one, that's my husband, then another break, and then bam, 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 bam. And so you can imagine what that it's not inexpensive. It's very expensive to raise kids, even if it was, years ago that they had these children. But nonetheless, you don't have any disposable income. Every penny goes to feeding your children and paying for your rent, your mortgage, whatever your bills are, and just hoping to make it, right? Like they had an overabundance of love in that family. And those 9 kids have always been super close. They talk to each other all the time. It's a really beautiful family. But imagine never really being able to take these big vacations, hearing about where your ancestry is from, but having no idea what that's like. And then...
So what it was like for them to visit Poland after so many years of having that idea in the back of their mind?
Yeah, I think they cried every day.
Really?
Out of joy. Like you could see them tear up. When I took them to Częstochowa to see the Black Madonna and they were praying in the church, and my mother-in-law was visibly emotional. We also lost my brother-in-law, Ben, 4 years ago. On July 1st, he was hit by a car when he was training for a decathlon. He was on a bicycle, 1:30 in the afternoon, broad daylight, fully visible on a straightaway. Some guy wasn't paying attention and just, boom, plowed right through him. It was horrible.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. But everywhere we go, we always think of Ben. And so I know that in that moment, my mother-in-law was thinking of her son and my father-in-law as well. And, being with one of her kids, and everywhere we go, like the whole family always, anytime we see a bicycle, we think Ben's with us, right? And instead of being horrified by it, we just think that's what he was doing. It's what he loved to do. It's the last thing he was doing when he left this earth. And instead of hating bicycles, we're going to just think of Ben in a positive way every time. So everywhere we went, we would see beautiful artworks with bicycles. And we're like, oh, Ben's with us on this trip. And he would be so happy that his mom and dad are finally seeing Poland, because growing up your whole life and never been there, we were the first of all the kids to go to Poland. And what an incredible experience for our 12-year-old to be the only one of 18 grandkids who will ever have the experience of having been in Poland with his grandmother and grandfather. So what a blessing, right?
Did that trip influence the other siblings to maybe consider the trip to Poland?
Oh, for sure. They're all super jealous in a good way, right? But they were all very thankful that we were able to do this for my mother and father-in-law. I've been traveling so much just for work in general that I've been saving up all my miles, so that I could someday make this trip a reality and not just take them, but fly them first class with all my points. And that was my dream, right? I mean, my in-laws created the most important person in my life, which is my husband. He's the best man I've ever met besides my father. And he gave me the gift of our son. And I thought, wouldn't this be the most incredible thing to be able to just do something special for my mother and father-in-law? They're incredible people who deserve the best. Being away from home, there's a downside. The upside was that I accrued a lot of miles over the years. And my son was able to enjoy this more so with his grandparents in a way that is life-changing and a memory that he'll never, ever, ever forget. At 12 years old, you're going to remember those experiences. And every day that we woke up and we saw my in-laws, David, his parents, so happy, so at peace, and just proud of who they came from, right? And to be there in that land, I think was incredibly special. Imagine when we were at Parliament meeting with the Speaker and all the other ministers having tea and beautiful, little bites to eat. And my mother-in-law, who started crying when we were at that meeting because of the thought of her parents, her grandparents were the ones who were in Poland. Her parents were born in the United States. But I don't think in her wildest imagination, she would have thought that her grandmother would someday, from in the heavens, be able to see her granddaughter meeting with the Speaker of Parliament and these other ministers in Polonia. So amazing.
Besides the meeting with the Polish politicians, was there ever a time, a place, a moment, a smell, anything that has stuck with you from Poland?
Well, everything. It really was so beautiful. I can't wait to go back. I think that one of the funniest, perhaps, stories is that when I was going over all the places to go with my staff and with other leaders in the Polish community in Chicago, we had meetings in every stop that we went to with dignitaries and stuff. So it was really this beautiful experience with my in-laws, but I also incorporated, my work into it. So I took advantage of the opportunity that I was there to meet with other dignitaries or business leaders and things like that. But originally, Gdańsk was not on our itinerary. We were going to fly directly to Warsaw and then begin our tour of our visits and so forth from there.
Okay.
And one of the members of my staff was like, well, you only have 7 days. Poland is so big that you can't really see it unless if you spend some good quality time in some of these cities. And Gdańsk is it's just water. There's a lot of water. It's by the Baltic. And, it might not be where you want to go. It's beautiful, but it's there's other places to see in Poland. And so then I thought, well, my father-in-law was in the Navy. I know he loves water. And none of the other places that we're going to are going to have water, right? So let's go. And so what we did was instead of flying into Warsaw, we flew into Berlin. And then I decided to take a train from Berlin into Gdańsk.
Oh, wow.
Now, my son, David, I should say our son, my husband and my son, but I'm going to say my son just because David's not sitting with me right here. But little David is obsessed with World War II. And so I thought I'd do something very special for him. And we would fly into Berlin, spend one day in Berlin, have him tour some of the World War II important, places to go. And then from there, we would take a train to Gdańsk because the train ride isn't super long, but they would get to see countryside. And I thought that would be very pretty. So we decided to do that. And it was beautiful to have the experience on the train coming from Berlin to Gdańsk. And then when I got to Gdańsk and I saw how gorgeous it is, I called one of my staffers, who I will not mention his name, but he's amazing, but I don't want to embarrass him. But I was like, if I didn't know better, I would fire him because this should have been like an absolute must in Poland. For if you've never been to Poland, do not miss Gdańsk. It's magnificent.
What other places did you visit?
So we started in Gdańsk, and then we drove from Gdańsk to the Malbork Castle. And then from Malbork, we went to Częstochowa to see the Black Madonna. And that was very emotional, beautiful. And then from Częstochowa, we went to Warsaw. And then from Warsaw, we went to Krakow. And then from Krakow, we visited Auschwitz and Birkenau. Especially my son, wanted to see that. And that was very powerful. And then that same day, though, we saw the salt mines, which were very beautiful. So two different emotions, right? One which is beautiful and pure amazement in the best of ways, and another one which is horrible in the worst of ways, right? But this salt caves, if people have never seen that, you have to go see those salt caves. It's like a wonder of the world, and an UNESCO heritage site, as it should be. But then we went back to Krakow, then went to Zakopane. That was the last place we went to. When we went into Zakopane, we were driving to go towards our hotel, and boom, we see this huge billboard on the side of the road that says Shostak. It was almost like a welcome home, because that's where my mother and father-in-law's family are from. Well, from that region, right?
Did that lead to any discoveries, any stories? Did you look who's behind that?
No, so my mother-in-law is totally into genealogy. So I knew like where all the family was from, but none of that family is still around, and they never stayed in touch. She's, like I said, third generation. So, and they don't speak Polish either. My in-laws don't speak Polish. But I will say that we made other family members, because when we were in Gdańsk, we were picked up at the train station by two friends. They weren't my friends yet. I knew them, kind of like Adam Bala. Do you know who Adam Bala is?
No, I did not know.
And Mariana Humeska. Did you go to Copernicus Center when they did the piano thing and all that?
Yes,
so
I was
she's
there.
the concert pianist. She was the main pianist, and her husband produces all that. But he's also very good friends and instrumental with Parliament. So he's connected to the Parliament. So he's the one who, on behalf of the consul and all the people here, coordinated our visits with the dignitaries.
Got it.
So we were supposed to meet up with him officially for like full-time business on that, like in the middle of the week when we went to Warsaw. But he picked us up with his wife from the train station so we'd know how to get to our hotel. And when we got to our hotel, they're like, would you guys like to have dinner? We can talk about like when we're going to meet up and so forth in Warsaw. So I said, let me take you guys to dinner. So we went to dinner, and wouldn't you believe it? We became best friends. And then they're like, well, we feel bad about you guys. We did have a driver for the trip, but we feel bad about you guys having to like figure out where to go on your own. We're like, no, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. They're like, well, if you'd like, we can help you navigate this. And we're like, well, only if it's okay with you guys. We don't want to impose on anyone. And they became literally our family that whole week. We got to meet their kids, and my son got to hang out for the rest of the week with their twins. And they were playing soccer in literally walking with the soccer ball down all the Polish streets, in the town squares, playing soccer. I have the coolest videos and photos and memories. They're pen pals now from across the ocean. And it was such a great experience that I joke, how people go on a vacation and they come back with a t-shirt as a souvenir. I came back with a brother and sister.
That's spectacular.
And so they've come, when they came for the concert here at Copernicus Center, they stayed in our home. And
Really? That is great.
They're family to us. So, it's amazing that we had to travel that far to meet my long lost brother and sister from Poland. But yeah, Mariana and Adam and their kids are their family to us now. And it goes to show how big the world is and at the same time how small it is.
You mentioned castles. That is extremely difficult to explain to somebody who haven't left the States. You don't really have any medieval castles anywhere near in Illinois.
No, there's like medieval castle. What is it? What's the name of that place? Medieval Times, right?
Medieval Times, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's like the size of one of those rooms in a castle in Poland. And Malbork has the largest brick castle in the world.
Isn't it something to actually see it with your own eyes?
It's mind-boggling. Yeah, it's really, really spectacular. The other thing that blows your mind is how old these buildings are, but just how beautiful.
Yes, that's another thing. People don't realize how old Europe is.
Like in Krakow. You go there. The war did not touch Krakow. So those buildings are still intact and, have been around for, eons, but they look magnificent. And Warsaw is different because, of course, it was completely obliterated with the war. So a lot of those buildings were rebuilt to look like they did back then, but you can still kind of tell, right, that they're new versus the beauty and the grandeur of a city like Krakow, which I would recommend to anyone. People think of like the beauty of Europe as Austria, Prague,
maybe
things
Paris,
like that, Vienna,
right? France.
No, you got to go to Poland. I've been to all those other places. Poland is magnificent.
So after your trip, what is the biggest takeaway that you came back with?
In terms of Poland, the biggest takeaway, I would say that it is so beautiful and there's so much going on. The economy is bustling in Poland right now. The question that I asked at the time was like, why would anyone want to leave Poland right now? But obviously, there's not a lot of people that want to leave it now. More people are deciding to go back to Poland because it is producing much more opportunity than it did in the past. And it's absolutely beautiful. You can have that like comfortable country lifestyle. It's not communist anymore. And so, there's a lot going on in Poland that's positive. 30, 40 years ago, that wasn't the case, right? So I think that a lot of people now go back and forth a lot between the United States and Poland. They're not having to flee Poland for opportunity. Now they might have another home in Poland or a home here in Chicago. And because there's so many, obviously, Polish people here. But for example, my neighbors next door, they're always going to
back
Poland.
And forth?
Yeah, and on both sides. I have Barbara on one side, Barbara and Henry, and I have Janina and Edward on my other side. And so I'm always like, "You're going to Poland again?" And now I understand it.
Now you know why.
I totally know why. It's amazing. Healthcare obviously is a lot less expensive to access over there than it is here. So for people who are able to do both, it's almost like having a vacation home in one of the most beautiful places in the world. But I was surprised that, so in terms of I would say the biggest takeaway is that I did not expect Poland to be as beautiful and happening as it was, right? In terms of I still thought maybe they were struggling somewhat. And so I was completely mistaken as to what the actual conditions in Poland are. I was also really interested to see how no matter who I talked to, the issue of Ukraine always came up. Always. Whether it was with the ministers that I met with, whether it was with the driver who was driving us around, whether it was talking to people in the square, conversations that would pop up. And I always thought it was also interesting to see how welcoming they were to the Ukrainian refugees. That is something that you just don't see here in America. We are not welcoming to immigrants, unfortunately, at this time in our country, but also just the concept of everything that is happening in Ukraine. It's something that I saw not just in Poland, but also in my visit to Germany last April. A year ago, April, I was in Germany and for a transatlantic partnership trip and met with members of the government, members of their military. We learned about what the worry is, in fact, of what happens if Ukraine falls to Russia, right? Like who's next? And obviously Poland is right next door, and that is of massive concern to Poland, but it's of massive concern to other European countries and allies, like Germany as an example. I'm sure the same is true to any European country that you visit these days. But the narrative that exists over there is very different than the narrative that's being sold over here, right? And years ago, when the war first broke out, our country rallied behind Ukraine. And now we're seeing the opposite happen. And, they're on their own. I would have never believed that to be true. But unfortunately, that's the situation that we're living in right now. So I do think Germany, Poland, they're struggling with the issues of immigration as well. That's another thing that was clear to me. But I would say that's a sign of how their economies are improving, how their living conditions are improving, that it's not just Ukrainian immigrants that I'm talking about here, just immigration as a whole. People immigrate to countries that they believe have opportunity for them. And so instead of seeing a loss of population, they're seeing an influx of people who want to be there. And I would say maybe not everybody wants that, but it's a sign of success for any country who has to struggle with that issue.
Seeing the huge number of refugees that the Poland had to deal with, Ukrainian refugees, pretty much since the beginning of the war in 2022, did that change your definition of what crisis actually is after you came back here to the States and got back to your professional work? Did that change how you do things these days?
Well, I don't know that it changes how I do things, but I've had the privilege of having traveled the world. I mean, I've been to real conflict zones. As a matter of fact, I was one of only 9 women who was selected to be a part of to be an official monitor of the Iraqi elections in 2010. You probably don't know that about me. Most people don't. It's not something I talk about, but it seems relevant to your question. And so I was one of 9 women who went at the behest of the United States Department of State, U.S. Department of State. And at that time, that was the first completely free and fair election for the Iraqis. They did not want the U.S. military to have a visible presence during their elections. So the decision was to send official monitors, but they wouldn't be military people. And they sent a group of 9 women from across the country, and I was one who was selected to be on that trip. Yes, it was awesome. So I was there. I was in Jordan first because they had the refugees in Jordan during that war, right? They sent a lot of people to Jordan, but they were Iraqis, so they had the right to vote in the exterior. So we watched that, and then from there went into Baghdad, and I was both in the green zone, which is the safer zone. I mean, it's not safe when they're at war, but still safer, and also into the red zone on election day to monitor the elections. And it was an incredible opportunity. So I've been to Brazil as well for the State Department. I went to Venezuela for the State Department the week that right after our ambassador had been kicked out by Hugo Chavez. So it was a kind of a precarious time to send us. They called and said, maybe we should cancel this trip. It's, very hectic there right now. I'm like, no, send me, right? So I like these experiences. And every time I come back from one of those experiences, I come back to a country that we have what I would call high-class problems many times, where we almost create drama where there shouldn't be any. We don't realize how lucky we are as a country to have a buffer called Canada or a buffer called Mexico and Central America. I mean, countries like Germany, or countries like, in your case, Poland, that are right next door to Ukraine, who's right next door to Russia, who wants to take over Ukraine. And I think Putin would love to recreate the Soviet Union that existed that has been toppled. I would be scared that my next door neighbor essentially could be a threat at any given moment. As Americans, we never worry about Canada wanting to attack us. We never once go to bed thinking that Mexico wants to invade us or attack us. I mean, the president's language that he uses about invasions, that's not helpful language. It just inflames the reality. Like anyone who tells me that people who come from Poland and overstay their visas, but are working every day, like trying to provide for their family and create an opportunity for themselves and to help their family back in Poland, I say those are great people. We shouldn't villainize those kinds of people, right? So using words like invaders or, alien invasions to describe immigrants, I think is a mistake. But these other countries, they face real threats of invasion from real military armies, like what we see Ukraine dealing with Russia. Like, these are people who are dying every day in a war that they wish they didn't have to deal with. And if you're Polish, you might be thinking, are we next, right? So not good.
That is true. And also something to take into the account for those who not know. Everything in Europe, the distances are shorter.
So short. It's like right next door. Exactly. It's like Indiana. If Indiana wanted to come after us with everything they have, right, we would be looking at life very differently than we do right now.
Here in US, the danger is thousands of miles away. In Europe, it's literally a few kilometers away.
Every day, it's just a few kilometers away. So yeah, I think that the sentiment is different. But you know what's also amazing? That no matter how close this threat is, and no matter how scary it is, the reality of what they're living through, they're happy. And they're going about making the best and the most out of that day. And so I think that there is a lot of power and a lot to admire in the resilience of people who have to live with that threat every day and still manage to find happiness in their life and be good to other people. That's awesome.
I'm really curious if all that friction between state, local, federal government, especially the one that we're experiencing right now in Chicago and Illinois, does that create problems for the state of Illinois, financial concerns that an average citizen may not even consider?
Sure. I mean, I think that it's just about math, right? It's about math. And so you have an immigrant population, and I think this is true whether it's Illinois or any other state in America. We have entire industries that depend on immigrants. Agriculture is a perfect example, right? Who do you think actually picks the tomatoes and the vegetables and the lettuce and all those things that get on our plate every day? Who's working in the meat plants that produces, the beef that we're able to buy or the pork that we're able to buy? Those aren't your traditional thought of what you think of an American. Those are typically migrants who come in and they take these super hard, terrible jobs sometimes, but they're helping them provide for their family, right? Who do you think is working in the hotels, especially as housekeepers or maids, right? Who are, taking these super heavy linens and folding the beds, making the beds and, cleaning the bathrooms and doing everything so that we can go in and have the most luxurious day in our beautiful hotel room. Those are a lot of Hispanic and Polish, as a matter of fact, immigrants that are doing that work. So when we create a situation or condition where immigrants are afraid to leave their home, to go to work, to take their kids to school, literally to leave their house, they're not showing up to work. They're not eating in their communities. And as you know, Chicago, as an example, is a very segregated city, right? We choose to go, maybe not segregated because we're forcing it, but people go, okay, I love this little Hispanic community over here and we feel at home and there's something special about that. We love the Polish community, right? We've got our restaurants, we have our things that we love in our community that speaks English but also speaks Polish and we feel comfortable and safe there. We have all these really awesome ethnic communities, the Vietnamese corridor, the African corridor, the Indian, Pakistani corridor. We have all these awesome ethnicities represented who choose to locate in areas where they don't feel like they're an other, right? And so to all of a sudden say, well, if you go to your house, you might find an ICE agent out there trying to nab you. The reality of it is that who's going to those restaurants then? And what happens when the very people who live in those communities who normally keep those restaurants going, those retail districts vibrant, when they're not going there, then those retail or those commercial areas suffer significantly.
The revenue stops.
Yes, and that's revenue. That is revenue. So as a state controller, watching revenue come into the state, the more businesses we have, the more people we have employed, the more the supply chain continues to operate steadily and predictably, the better for finances, not just here in Illinois, but in any state in the nation. So crippling our agricultural industry, certainly not good for the country's economy or that particular state's economy. The tariffs that the president has imposed, and every day they're different, right? It's almost like he wakes up and he's like, I don't like this country. I'm going to hit him with 100% tariffs. And then 3 days later, okay, just 80% or whatever. The instability of all this, it's terrible for the economy. And there are right now, one of the highest incidences of suicide is with farmers.
Really?
Yeah, because they're like, this is not working out. There's a high degree of depression and even suicide. I just read an article about this. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal about how many agricultural people are doing the unthinkable because they're losing everything because of these tariffs. Their crops are unable to be sold. And so what happens? That's like money that just is rotting in front of you. So I think that all of this instability and these attacks really on immigrants, let me just be clear. I'd be the first to say that if you come to this country, you're here undocumented, and you commit crimes where you hurt people, you steal, you rape, you murder, you try to murder, you should not live in this country, right? But if you come here to work hard and you keep your nose clean and you're contributing to the economy like the majority of our immigrants do, those are exactly the kind of people that we should allow to have a path to legalization and someday become proud Americans. You know, I'm not against going after the worst of the worst. That's who we should be going after. You know, whether it's immigration or our police officers, it doesn't matter, right? Like if you're going to come here, I use this analogy. If I invite you into my home and you come into my home and then you hurt my children and you steal all my appliances and set a room on fire, then I don't want you in my home anymore. That's just common sense. But if you come and you incorporate yourself and you help and you become like a member of our family, then I want to protect you. And I think that's just the human instinct. So I think we need a little bit more empathy, a lot more compassion, and a lot more humanity. And we should be able to find the balance of not supporting criminals, like violent criminals, but definitely supporting the hardworking immigrant who's contributing to our economy much more than they receive back. That should not be controversial. And anyone who wants to seek an opportunity in America who does nothing but work hard and contribute to taxes, which they do. I mean, Greg, have you ever seen people asked at the grocery checkout lane if they can see their green card before they're allowed to buy groceries? Did you ever see it?
I've never seen it.
But people turn over green cash all the time, right? That's the only kind of green thing they're interested in. We'll give you your groceries, you give us the green cash. And they're paying taxes for that stuff. They're paying taxes anytime they go to a retail establishment and pay. Many undocumented people have an ITIN number and they're paying their payroll taxes and they don't claim a return. So there are plenty of statistics that demonstrate that the undocumented immigrant population contributes more to the economy than they ever get back in any types of benefits. So, you know, this narrative that they're all here to steal and take away from the Americans and they're taking your jobs, none of that's true. Anyone who knows a hardworking Polish immigrant working, you know, hard, like all the time, they're going to know that they're an added net positive for our community, for our state, for our country. And we should have the ability to differentiate between the two and support one. And most importantly, give them a path to legalization. They want to do it the right way. But as you know, it's not that easy.
You and I both know that many people complain, why can't you do it legally? And I think a lot of people just simply don't understand that for plenty of those people, there isn't any path forward.
There's no legal path. Even if they wanted to. I always tell people, do you really think that it's because they're lazy? Like that if they could go right now to the immigration office and say, I've been here undocumented for 15 years. Can I please sign and I'll become a U.S. citizen? They would all do it in a heartbeat. They'd do it the day after arriving here. But they don't have a legal path to do it. If they did that, they would immediately be deported. So there are certain countries where you're never, under any circumstances, going to be approved for a legal visa into the United States of America. And if your family's starving and no one leaves their entire family behind, the language that they know, the country that they were born in and love, because they don't love their country. It's because they want their children to eat, to get a good education. And they want to become a part of the American dream. And eventually, a part of that dream is becoming an American citizen. But if we don't allow people the opportunity to do that, and if you were one of those people who was starving or lived in a war-torn nation, you would do whatever it took to be able to provide a safe and secure environment for your family. So none of us should ever fault a person, regardless of where they are coming from in the world, for wanting to come to America. That means that they think America is the greatest place in the world. I agree. We should wear that as like a badge of honor, that this is the country that everyone wants to come to. But we should also say we will welcome people who are going to come here and work hard and contribute to our economy and become legal residents and citizens. There should be a path for that. That doesn't mean I support open borders. I do not support open borders. I support secure borders where we know exactly who's coming in because we're going to let them have an opportunity to have a path to legalization. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, if they come in to cause trouble, then we'll pay for their ticket out of this country, right? But otherwise, we should be able to have a controlled way of allowing people into this country, no matter what country they're from.
One other thing that even my friends and people that I spoke with don't understand was the issue with the birthright citizenship that president wanted to take away. What's going to happen in 20 years? You're going to have the entire segment of population that belongs nowhere. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do with them? It seems like nobody took time to think it through.
I think you're right. We need more critical thinking in this country, period. More critical thinkers. We don't have enough. It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, it's completely unconstitutional and un-American. So let's start with that. People are so lucky who are born in this country. I'm one of them. I'm so lucky to be an American by birth. But I think there are people who, they can't control where they were born, but they can control who they want to be. And I think one of the most beautiful things about America is that it is, in fact, the greatest idea that was ever born. And it was based on freedom and who you identify as. So to think that you could be born in, so many other countries, but still at the end of the day, dream of becoming an American, that speaks to the beauty of this idea of America. Why would we want to say people don't have a right to think about that, right? You should be able to dream whatever you want to dream. And if you are the kind of person who wants to come here and create jobs and work hard and, instill your good values and make that a part of who you are as an American, that's a great thing. We need more of that. We don't need less of that.
Before we continue, a quick note from our sponsor, which happens to be me. If you've been injured here in Illinois and need legal help on your path to recovery and compensation, visit ChubernatLaw.com. Now, back to my conversation with Susana Mendoza. You are the state's CFO, Chief Financial Officer. You sign checks for the state of Illinois. How does it feel to sign a check for 100 million, let's say, when a normal person overthinks a new fridge or a new car purchase? How does it really feel to issue a check for 100 million or more?
Well, I would say it's a privilege to be the state's controller. It's an honor to get to do that on behalf of the people of Illinois. But it just feels like I'm writing a check because it's not my money. So I feel an added responsibility when I sign that check. It's not that it feels good. It's like I have to be sure that we're going to honor every dollar that gets sent our way to pay these bills. I always remind people when they say, or they ask a question like that, or they say, oh, you're the money lady. And I'm like, it's not my money. I'm the guardian of the taxpayers' money. That's how I see my role, as protective and as making sure that we try to stretch the value of every dollar as much as possible. So think of me as like your coupon controller.
This makes me think of a time when we receive a settlement check, for example, a lot of money that is not all my money, right? I actually cannot wait until everything is distributed, so I'm no longer responsible for it.
Oh, you're funny. I thought just because it feels good to make sure they get their money, which is true, right?
It does feel good.
But you don't want that on your hands, so...
Exactly. People don't realize sometimes it's a huge responsibility and a huge headache, especially if it's not your money. Sometimes I tell, how it is when you borrow somebody's car or somebody asks you to watch over their dog or a kid. You really want to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Nothing goes wrong. That's exactly right. That's the best way to put it. I want to make sure nothing goes wrong. And I also want to make sure that you're not waiting for your money longer than you should be. So that's why, when I first became controller, the average delay in paying people the money that they were owed by the state of Illinois, believe it or not, was 210 business days.
Oh, wow. That's pretty much the entire year.
Yeah, it's 9.5 months in real people time. So imagine you have a contract with the state of Illinois to clean a building, and you have to clean the building. So you're having to pay the cleaners that are part of your business. You're paying for all the supplies. You've put your own money to be able to provide this service to the state of Illinois, and then we make you wait 9.5 months to get paid. It should be criminal. It's why nobody wanted to do business with the state of Illinois. And then I came in and said, that is insane. And no one's going to, not only do they not want to do business, but if they decide to do business with us, they're going to inflate their prices significantly.
To account for that risk.
To account for that risk, of course.
So what was the holdup? Was it
We had no budget, 736 days without a budget. I came in on day 523 of the budget impasse.
And you really wanted the job?
I did, because I like to get things done. And I was horrified at what was happening in the state. I used to be a legislator, for 10 years before I became city clerk of Chicago. And then after being that, that's when the state of Illinois was essentially, metaphorically on fire. And maybe I have a little bit of a fireman's complex. I like to run towards the fire and put it out. And so I think I do best under extreme pressure. And that was, I think, truly the most difficult elected position in the country at that time, because every other state in America had a budget. They were all paying their bills like they were supposed to. They were making a ton of money off of their investments because the economy had never been stronger, or the stock market, right? In the meantime, Illinois shot itself in the foot on both feet and its knees, and we were paying over $1 billion in late payment interest penalties for paying our bills late. And also, we drove up a backlog of unpaid bills, so people waiting to get paid, of almost $17 billion during the best economic bull market in American history. And to make it just that much more challenging, I only had $48,000 in the state's rainy day fund when I took office. So $48,000 against $17 billion in debt and 210 business day delay. So, go back, let's rewind 3 years now. I paid down all of the backlog of unpaid bills before getting a penny of the federal ARPA in the door. So I always crack up when people still say, oh, well, Mendoza used COVID money and, they took all the COVID money and paid down all the bills. And I'm like, no, I've said it a million times over. I'll say it again. It's called good financial planning, strategic management of our state's finances, and understanding math. And also having a real passion in my heart for helping businesses and not wanting to make businesses into unwilling lenders to the state of Illinois. Nobody should have to wait much longer than a normal payment cycle to get paid. So we no longer have this backlog of unpaid bills. I got to work doing a bunch of stuff to bring that down. And then I managed the COVID pandemic beautifully because I'd already had this horrific experience that I had a ton of experience on. And so that went without a hitch. I think every other controller or treasurer in America was freaking out because they had only experienced good times. Then the pandemic hits and boom, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm like, the worst virus to ever hit us financially was that 736-day budget impasse. And the governor who was like tearing us down at the time, who was a different governor. But long story short, I had the experience under my belt. So we got through the pandemic. Most people didn't feel it from a financial perspective. And then now we're all on the upswing. So before I took office, we had nothing but credit downgrades for 20 years. I've now helped deliver Illinois' 9th credit upgrade, the first in over 20 years. I took the bill backlog or the payment cycle to the vendors down from 210 business days the day I walked in to 14 days today. And I've had it at around 14 days or less for the last 3 years. That's super impressive.
That is something.
Yep. And we took the rainy day fund from a whopping miserable $48,000 to $2.4 billion today and growing. So that gives us maybe 16 days worth of reserves. Like if government collapsed, we could survive for 16 days. At the time with the 48, that's not even enough for 30 seconds. So we've gone a long way from 30 seconds to 16 days or under 30 seconds. But the average state, so to put it in context, has about 50 days worth of reserves. So we're still a long way from where we need to be, which is why you're going to keep hearing me say we need more in the rainy day fund.
Do you manage your own household finances differently, having gone through all of this experience?
That is so funny that you asked me. I think you're the first person to ever ask me about my own finances at home. The truth be said, I am the controller for the state of Illinois, and David Shostak is the controller for our family. He is amazing. My husband is incredible. And if it weren't for this partnership that we have, where he's like fully supportive and I don't have to worry about looking at our personal finances because he has them completely under control. We do talk about them, of course, all the time. So I'm completely financially aware of where we are as a family. But he takes that off of my hands so that I can fully focus on doing the job I need to do, which I think the voters believe is excellent as they keep electing me. And in the last election cycle, in fact, I was the highest vote getter in the entire state of Illinois for any elected office.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But that's, I think, a result of people trusting me with their money, and I'm eternally thankful for that.
Susana, so one question that I should have started with, is the P really silent in Comptroller? Which one is it?
It's Controller. So it is. It's silent.
So it is silent.
It is silent. But it makes it confusing because every time I tell people to go to our website, I have to spell it out and say it's Illinois controller, but it's spelled like comptroller. Like, it should just be comptroller if that's what it looks like. But no, it's the actual pronunciation is controller.
Is there any reason why the P is over there?
Well, I think that the controller, when you say CONTROLLER, how it sounds, that was typically in the private sector. Then when this position was created in the public sector, my understanding is that it's spelled differently, but it's still pronounced the same. So it's just a lot of times things don't make any sense in government. Yeah, I think you know this, right? So
yes.
I think this is a good example. So I tell people, comptroller, controller, whatever you feel most comfortable. I've been called much worse.
So you're one of the few people who have an inside view to Illinois finances. How does it feel to know how fragile and how complex this system really is?
Again, that's like a huge responsibility. I think, though, transparency is critical. And then talking about what our fiscal condition is. Because like when I first came in, there was a lot of hiding the ball, right? So I didn't know how bad of a financial crisis we were in because I couldn't see it. And I had to literally pass legislation that would allow me to have a better view of the state's expenses. Because you would think, as the state CFO, that I automatically can see all the expenditures from the governor and all the state agencies that report to him. But believe it or not, I had no visibility on it. So I would get people call me and say, Controller, remember, this is during the budget impasse where people's businesses were going out of business because they weren't being paid. And I'd have people say, Controller, there's a nursing home is a perfect example, said, we are owed $21 million. When are we going to get paid? We're going to miss our payroll next week. And if you miss your payroll, that's the beginning of the end of a business, right? If you're not paying your employees.
Exactly. People will quit.
They'll quit. And in this case, they would have been people caring for our most vulnerable senior citizens in our state, right? You can't have that happen. And so I went into my computer. This is the first week on the job in December. And I'm like, $21 million for this provider. I'm like, I don't have any bills for $21 million. I don't know what they're talking about. And I did have $2.1 million worth of bills. Now, I'd asked them before I looked, well, what's your payroll? What do I have to come up with? And they said $1 million would get us through our payroll. And I said, okay, I know I don't have $21 million, but let me see if we could work something out with the $1 million as an emergency, right? Because we can't have these seniors unprotected. So I go in and I'm like, 2.1 million. And I go, you know what? Maybe it was a miscommunication. It was a decimal was out of place. 2.1, 21, the person who called me was a state representative on behalf of his constituent. So I thought maybe that's where there was a miscommunication, right? So I call him up and I'm like, hey, good news and bad news. What do you want first, right? And he's like, I guess the good news. And I'm like, the good news is I can help you with your payroll. The bad news is I definitely don't have $21 million. But perhaps another bit of good news is that it's just 2.1. I looked at my system. It's just 2.1. It's not 21. I think there was a miscommunication. And he's like, thank you so much. But I don't think there's a miscommunication here. I'm confident that my constituent is owed $21 million. But let me call you back. I'll just triple check. So he calls me back and he's like, no, Controller, it's $21 million at least.
At least.
Those are invoices that have already been sent in. These invoices had been waiting 11 months to be paid. And guess what? I didn't have them and I couldn't see them and I did not know they existed. So it wasn't until I communicated with this provider that I said, I'm going to drive out to Peoria, that's where they were, and I want you to walk me through what the process is for you to submit your invoices to the state, and then I'm going to find out what the process is when the state gets it. When is it that I can see them? Because I can't see them right now. And that's when I found out that even if you were like the vendor, for example, and I gave you the contract, you provide the service, you send me as the contracting agency the invoice that you completed the job and you want payment. And then I can sit on this thing for up to a year, the fiscal year, before I submit it to the controller. And it's not until your invoice is in the controller's office that the controller can actually see that we owe you that money. And I thought, what kind of business would still be in business if they could not see the expenditures charged to that business's account? And I thought to myself, how is it possible that all the controllers before me, not one of them thought we need to fix this? So it was the worst because nobody should be crafting a budget in May with a actual accounting that was only current as of June 30th of the year before. And that's what the current law said at the time. I would get a report once a year. I'd get it in October. It was only current as of June 30th of that year. And all of that report told me is how much money each agency spent, but not what they spent it on. It would say, like, for example, Department of Corrections, parentheses. Anytime you see parentheses in accounting, that's bad. It means negative. And it would say like 480 in the parentheses, which means $480 million over what the legislature appropriated for them. So it's deficit spending, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, like we should be able to see if I budget $1 million for you that, come June, if you've already burned through, or like, let's say middle of the year, you've burned through 90% of that, then odds are you're going to blow through your budget and you got to throw up a warning signal, right? I had no ability to do any of that because
there was no built-in warnings?
No, nothing. So I had to change the law and I got to work on that right away. And I said, I need to see at least a monthly accounting of the state's expenditures so that nobody ever thinks it's a good idea to drop 11 months worth of bills on my desk overnight. Because if you're think about your own household. If you're managing your household budget and you have no idea that your kid went on a wild shopping spree over the last year with your credit cards, and you think that your bills this month are, X amount of dollars, and then that bill finally comes due and it's another $20,000 you had no idea was even spent, it would throw off your entire budgeting. And that's what was happening in Illinois. So we couldn't do anything right. So I changed that. And I got the bill passed. The governor at the time vetoed it. He did not want the actual truth of the deficit spending that had been occurring to be made public. And so I worked even harder to override the governor's veto. And I did. In fact, I overrode governor veto of my very sensible pro-business and pro-accounting legislation unanimously in the House of Representatives. That's the first time in the history of Illinois that a sitting governor's veto gets unanimously overridden. And then we almost overrid it unanimously in the Senate. There were 3 people that voted against me, but everybody else voted for it. And that was a game changer in transparency for Illinois. And it was cited in our first credit upgrade that was, incredibly valuable information. The credit rating agencies want to see transparency and full accounting. And so that was very helpful in me being able to get a handle on all the financial dysfunction and start to chip away at the debts. If we can't see the warts, if you just hide them, you're going to get a terrible infection, right? You have to be able to see the damage in order to fix it.
Why do you think the previous governor vetoed that bill?
Well, there's so many different reasons for that. Number one, because he didn't want the public to see how bad of a financial mismanagement had occurred on his watch. That's number one. $2.8 billion in deficit spending in 1 year. That's more than any governor in the history of Illinois. Those first 2 years that I was there, it was all about shining a light on this financial dysfunction and trying to convince the credit rating agencies not to further downgrade us, that the cavalry was coming. I was going to fix this, but I needed to see how bad it was to please not penalize us with another downgrade once they realize that we're actually worse than what they think we are, and to give me an opportunity to get to work on fixing it. And I said, I don't care how bad it is. If I can see it, I can fix it. But if I can't see it, then it's an impossible task. But yeah, it was a super hard job, and it required the credit rating agencies at least giving me an opportunity, a short window to show them that I was serious about instituting transparency reforms and getting to work on fixing the mess. But thankfully we did it. And look, Illinois is in a much, much better position now, 9 credit upgrades later, and a lot of transparency that doesn't exist, for example, at the city level or in other municipalities. And so I'm very happy about that.
What does the credit rating downgrade actually mean?
It means that anytime we need to borrow money, whether it's in an emergency from the marketplace, let's say, to be able to pay our bills. Let's say there's another economic crisis and we don't have enough revenue coming in. Then we would need to cover our bills, borrow from the marketplace. That's in an extreme situation. But on an everyday situation, we might need to borrow money from the market to build bridges or highway construction, things that are paid for over like a 20-year period of time because they cost billions, and it would not be reasonable to spend billions in cash on a project that's going to benefit a population for 20 to 30 years. So just like you wouldn't be expected to pay for your home in cash, you would mortgage that over a 30-year or a 15-year note. The state of Illinois has to borrow for big, huge, super expensive projects that are for the public good. So building schools, bridges, roadways, things like that, capital projects. So whenever we have to borrow and go to the market to finance those projects, if we have bad credit, just like you at home, if you have terrible credit and you want to buy a car, they might charge you 8% interest or 12% interest. And that's like buying 2 cars when you're done paying for the interest payments. But if you have really excellent credit, at least in the past, you used to get a 0% interest. So you're really just paying for the cost of the car, or maybe a 1 or 2% interest. Excellent credit gets much lower interest rates, which means you're saving a ton of money. If you have terrible credit, the best you're going to do is a really bad interest rate, which means you're paying a lot more.
And you will continue drowning in debt.
For sure. And so we definitely want to improve our credit rating so that anytime we do need to borrow for just big projects like that, we do it at the least amount of cost, which saves taxpayers money at the end of the day.
So, Susana, we all have our nightmares. For me, a personal injury attorney, it's missing the deadline. That's pretty much the worst thing that can happen. What is the doomsday scenario for the Illinois Comptroller?
It would be if, for example, we have another economic collapse through no fault of our own that would drive a massive hole into our budget, like a revenue collapse. Because then we'd go back to, or actually, let me just be even clearer. The doomsday is going without a budget again. That's the easiest way that we get to that doomsday, is to repeat the mistakes of the past. We know what that's like. It's horrible. That's number one. The other doomsday is, of course, if there's an emergency through no fault of our own. I'll give you an example. The 2008 market collapse, right? Stock market, it ruined economies across the whole country. When you have expectations on returns and there's a major collapse, it throws a major hole in your budget. The downing of the towers on 9/11, that created an economic paralysis in our country that put states' economies behind through no fault of their own, right? So those are things that are out of your control. It's the same reason why, though, we need to protect ourselves from things that we can't control. It's why I'm always saying we need to pay more into our rainy day fund. We need to pay down our pension obligations as quickly as possible, put more money towards them. That's smart money because it's like making an extra payment on your mortgage. You're going to cut off years of the liability. So before spending any new additional dollars that we weren't expecting, kind of like if you got a bonus at work, instead of thinking about how we're going to spend it, the first thought should be, how are we going to save this? And I suggest putting it towards rainy day funds and putting it towards pension stabilization. If you still have extra revenues after that, then you could think about what other programs or what other things that have a good return on investment should we be investing these dollars in. But I think it's always smart money to essentially pay yourself first, which is putting money towards an emergency fund and paying down our biggest obligations so that we can at least shave some years off the back end. But yeah, that's the fear, is that we will not have revenues that meet the budgeted obligations.
Let's go back to 2019, running for Chicago mayor. That was intense.
Just a little.
Just a little. I'm curious if you have learned anything about yourself that you couldn't have learned otherwise without that experience.
Well, that's a great question. I would say anytime you pursue something that you don't succeed at is an incredible opportunity to learn from it. And I think how you deal with a failure or a loss is much more important than how you deal with a win. And so I think having done that experience, which was not fun at all, taught me a lot, though. It taught me, number one, like a part of me thinks and wishes I wouldn't have done it because it didn't feel right from the first moment. But I felt at the time, and to put it in context for people who don't remember, I was a state controller. I had already started the massive turnaround of the state's finances, so I felt like definitely know what I'm doing when it comes to the financials and managing them through crisis. And then Rahm Emanuel announced that he wasn't going to run for re-election. Now, I had already been re-elected as controller in the primary, which is essentially my race. And I I was going to have an opponent in the general, but for all intents and purposes, I was expected to win that race, right? The re-election. But Rahm called after the primary was already over, and he said, "I'm not going to run for mayor." And so my initial immediate concern was, oh my gosh, who's going to run the city of Chicago? Because we definitely need a strong mayor. This is the economic engine of the state of Illinois, and we can't afford to see it sputter. And so I ran for mayor not because I wanted to be the mayor, but because I wanted to make Chicago was in good hands, right? And I loved being controller. I had my hands full there, but I thought the more important job in terms of stabilizing the entire state's economy was to make sure that Chicago was well positioned to continue being that strong economic engine. The reason so many people come to Illinois, I mean, you know that to be true.
That is true. The third largest city in U.S.
Exactly. And it can't just have some person who doesn't know what they're doing at the helm. And so there was very little time, though. And I think this is like the biggest and most unique aspect of this race is that when I decided to run, I had about a 2 to 3 month window, 2.5 window between when I decided to run and when the race happened. And the reason why it was that short of a window is because this is, again, you've heard me talk about this fight, right, that was happening during my first 2 years as controller. One of the things, I'll give you an example. People thought, how could a governor be making moves that are so obviously bad for the state's economy and driving us towards junk bond territory? What maybe your audience should understand is that once a state goes into junk bond territory, which, by the way, no state in America ever has, so we would have been the first, and we were just one notch above junk. Huh?
Not a great title,
no,
though.
We were just teetering right over junk bond status. If we had gone into junk bond status, then you would not be able to access traditional loans. The only people who would be allowed to invest in Illinois' bonds would have been the most expensive interest rates for us. The hedge fund, the group of hedge fund managers who are allowed to take on high risk, but obviously they're going to charge you a lot more money for access to capital. Yet during the best economic bull market in American history, we self-inflicted the biggest financial wound this state has ever seen. We took our bill backlog from $5 billion, which was bad, and more than tripled it to almost $17 billion. We generated over $1 billion in late payment interest penalties for not paying our bills on time. We got 8 credit downgrades in 2 years. That's like almost unheard of. And we were just one notch above junk bond status. So we could not afford to do anything else wrong or else we would have gone into it.
So it felt rushed, you think?
100%. I mean, that's certainly not the way I would have wanted to do it. But you learn from that, right? I will never regret, though, that I did it. Even though I lost, it's no fun to lose. It feels horrible to put your name out there in such a high-profile position and then not succeed. But it would have been worse for me if I had known that I knew I could do the job, right? So if I had not tried and then seen what has been happening to our city and thought to myself, I wish I would have taken the risk. I should have run, because what if I had won? Then this would not be happening right now. But I'll never have that doubt because I did run. I did give voters a choice. They chose to elect Lori Lightfoot at the time. I don't have any regrets because I put myself out there, and I think that shows how much I loved our city. And it certainly wasn't because of a title. It's because you want to do something with that title to help the people that you're representing. So I've had the privilege of doing that as controller. I went back to work as controller. I really firmly believe, and I hope that I'll be the best controller the state's ever had, that any other controller will look to my work and say that's the bar, and they have to try to do better. That's a good thing for Illinois. But I learned that taking risks are necessary, and you should never be afraid to fail. I think you fail when you allow fear to stop you from doing something that you feel you need to do.
I think you're absolutely right. And after a project like this one, after a brutal day at work, when you come home, who's your personal controller? Who is the person that grounds you?
David and David, right? Nothing like a 12-year-old reminding you that you're, just a human being who loses their patience sometimes and has to exercise extreme patience. And my husband, like every time I walk through my door, Greg, if my son's home from school, it is, I get attacked. My staff will tell you the same thing. Like, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Sometimes they have to like catch me. And now he can knock me over because he's 12 and he's as tall as I am now. But it's the best feeling in the world to come home and I leave it all outside that door, all of it. I am not the political junkie. I'm not the person who like has to be talking about this 24/7. I definitely look forward to coming home. I give it my all when I'm not in the house, when I'm doing the role of controller. But when I walk into my house, it's like, I'm mommy. I'm Susana, right? I'm sweetheart to my honey. And he's my honey. See, he's my honey. David is my honey. I never call him David. I call him honey. He calls me sweetheart. And David calls me mommy. And it's the best title in the world, frankly, to be mommy, right? Or to be the sweetheart to my honey. And that keeps me real, right? It's a reminder of who I am and what's the most important thing. I think what should be the most important thing in anybody's life, which is their family. This is why you do this. And it's why I try to do it every time with integrity, because it is my name, my father's name, my husband, though, as his wife. And I don't want to do anything to ever have our son feel less than proud of who he is and who he came from, which is his father and me.
Susana, I know you haven't announced anything publicly, but I am curious. If you were to run for the mayor of Chicago again, what would you do differently this time?
You're being sneaky, Greg.
I'm trying to be a good podcast host.
Yes. Well, in a hypothetical, right? In a hypothetical, and in an if you were to, well, I think I do a lot of things differently. I mean, number one, it's a completely different scenario than when I did run in 2019, where I had a 2.5-month window and an inability to get into the neighborhoods to really make a case and to do all that. I think, running for any office where you actually have a runway in which you have some time to really build a great team, not something I did before. I didn't have the time to build a great team, but the team is so much a part of like a good, well-oiled machine, right? So like we run an incredible ship at the controller's office because I have an incredible team. And so I would, of course, take the time to build the right team, but most importantly is have the time to meet my constituents, which I did not have the time to do at all in the last election cycle. So just run a well-managed campaign. Starts with a great team. I know how to campaign. I love people. I genuinely do. It's not something you can fake, and people know that about me. And I think that really speaking and listening to the public as to what they want to see, what are their concerns, what are they worried about, what keeps them up at night, what would they love to see with their next mayor, and be a voice for all of Chicago. That's something that you need to put the time and the work into. It doesn't, just happen. Like I shouldn't be out there just saying what I think needs to be done for Chicago. It's what do people want to see in their next mayor. I do think, though, having gone on and continuing to go on like a thank you tour and where I thank everyone for giving me the awesome responsibility of being in public service for the last 24 years, whether they voted for me as a state rep, thank you for that. Whether you voted for me for city clerk of Chicago, thank you for that. Whether you were one of the people who helped make me the top vote getter in the whole state of Illinois as controller, thank you for that, because it does matter to me that I've had the people's trust. But also, I'm listening to them. What should I do next, right? What's the next thing you think I should do? I know I bring a ton of experience, but I bring it into lots of different things that I could do. Many people have been suggesting and encouraging me to run for mayor of Chicago because they, like I, are very concerned about the direction of our city. It's why I ran for controller, because I was super concerned about the direction of our state. And while many people were starting to give up on Illinois, I will never give up on Illinois. Just like I will never give up on Chicago. It's the city I was born in. I live in this city, and I'm raising my son in the city of Chicago with my husband. We don't want to leave, and we don't want to give up on it. So those are all things that, fuel me to want to do something about it. So the question ultimately would be if I decide to throw my hat into the ring. But I can guarantee you that if I do, it will be a very different scenario than in 2019.
Very good. If you decide to do it, I wish you best of luck, and I hope you will reconsider appearing on my podcast again and talking about your political agenda that you may have at that time.
Let's do it. When the time comes, if I do, then I'll make sure to give you a call and I'll be happy to be back with you, no doubt.
Awesome. I want to ask you about something that I see in my own Polish American community. We have huge numbers, especially around Chicago and Illinois, but that doesn't always translate to political power. And you, being the highest elected Hispanic official, you know how to get people to the polls. So I'm hoping you have some wisdom for me, because I have always been curious. How do you help those people, those communities realize the power they have?
So I don't think anybody has that magic formula. I mean, yes, it's true. I was the highest vote getter in the state of Illinois, but I wish a lot more people would come out to vote. So we always suffer from a very low voter turnout. I was going to ask you if you knew what the solution was to get the Polish community out to vote. The same is true in the Latino community. We don't come out to vote in the power that we have, because it's not true that we just have a whole bunch of undocumented people that can't vote. And it's definitely not true. And I'm sure you'll agree with me when people say that undocumented people, that we support them because we want them to go vote illegally. That's complete nonsense. There's zero proof of that. Not true. It's like the worst crime. If you get caught voting when you are not legally authorized to vote, I mean, that is like a super, super serious felony, and you will never be able to stay in this country. So I don't believe any of that. That's just a bunch of nonsense that is told so that people get angry. But I don't know how we can do it. I mean, really, could we get another Roman Paczynski to get people excited to come out and vote in the Polish community? I don't know that there will be one, or there is one out there, but it shouldn't take like a Roman Paczynski having to be on the ballot. It should just be that people realize that their vote matters. I think most people think their vote does not matter.
I think I agree with you on this one. Based on the conversations with my family, my friends, that seems to be the going narrative. Why would I take a day off from work, or why would I even bother if it doesn't change anything? That seems to be the narrative.
Yeah, but the thing is, people don't even have to take a day off from work. You get like 3 weeks to vote now. There's no excuse. I mean, you can go on the weekends, or you can go after your work. You can actually not have to take a day off of work at all, because you can do it in your pajamas in your house through an absentee voter ballot. We have made it as easy as humanly possible for people to vote. As a matter of fact, the last few elections, I believe I've voted by absentee ballot. Not the ones that I'm on the ballot, because I like to go vote when it's me.
Got it.
I vote. But if it's an off year where I'm not on the ballot, I like to go because I take my son with me. We take the family picture in the booth with my husband and my son. Hey, we voted. But if I'm not on the ballot that year, I actually love voting absentee because I'm not in a hurry. I have like 3 weeks. I get my ballot in the mail. It couldn't be easier. And then I have time to go through it, because sometimes those ballots are long. And I don't like to vote for people if I don't have any idea of who they are. I'll still vote, but, I think that's one of the reasons maybe other people are like, well, I don't really know who all the candidates are. I'm not going to waste my time, or I don't want to vote for somebody I don't know. But you should vote no matter what. It's a constitutional right that people have died for, trying to give us the right to vote. It is a central part of being an American. It is the least amount of work you have to do for the greatest amount of reward, because we all love to complain about how bad it is, but we're guilty of it being that bad if we didn't come out to vote.
I agree.
It's like not that complicated. I'm telling you, I went to Iraq. I was in Baghdad in the red zone, right? Boom, you could hear the bombs, boom. And you would see mothers and fathers with their children dressed as if they were going to church on a Sunday, their best clothes if they're going to a wedding, and braving bombs and suicide bombers
so they
to
could
go
cast the
vote. So they could go cast that vote. And I remember interviewing a father, a wife, and their 2 beautiful little daughters dressed in just the best clothes they had. And I said, weren't you scared to bring your daughters? I understand why you and your wife are here, but bringing your kids, I'm just curious what's going through your mind. And then he said to me, this is the first time in my life that I will get to vote for freedom. And he said, and I am trying to teach my daughters that there are things worth dying for, and freedom is one of them. Thankfully, they did not die that day, and the little girls were able to dip their fingers in the ink, and I'm sure I have that picture somewhere, but I'll never forget that, because I remember coming home, well, not home, but going back to my hotel that evening, and I wrote a Facebook page. I'm sure it's somewhere, back when Facebook really kind of first started, right? And I wrote this long thing because I wanted to get my thoughts, cogently memorialized. And I remember thinking to myself, I will never look at voting the same. For all these people who take it for granted, who think well, it's raining outside, I'm not going to go. It literally was raining bombs. And they still went because of what it means to vote. So I I really have very little sympathy and actually quite a bit of disdain for people who love to complain about how bad things are, but don't take even 5 minutes in their pajamas to cast a vote and put it back in the mail. It's that easy. If you don't vote, you should not complain. You don't have a right to.
At least I think I'm doing my job in trying to educate people, right? By telling them to go and vote and get educated, and by bringing people like yourself on a show, which I really appreciate that you accepted my invitation and made it over to my studio.
That's too nice. I'm happy to come anytime. By the way, your studio is amazing. So
I appreciate it.
Of all the podcasts I've done, I'm not trying to be extra nice. Like, the truth is, this is a real professional, beautiful setup. So congratulations.
I appreciate it. This means a lot.
No, for real. And keep it going, because we do need more people getting engaged in the process, right? It is just one day of your life to vote, which will influence for good or for bad the next 4 years of your life. And so, like, don't wait. We have the ability. We really do have the power. But we only have it if we exercise our constitutional right to go vote. Why let other people make decisions? People who don't even like you are going to be making decisions because you didn't vote the people that actually like you in, right? And the people that are going to work hard for you. So I have never been one to just complain and not do something about it. So I think, like, I have the power to go out and vote. The very first time I ran for office, Greg, do you know that I ran at the age of 25? And I lost by 55 votes against an incumbent. So for people who say that their vote doesn't count, they're wrong. It does. It matters. There's just a handful of people, 55 people, and I lost that race. Then I knew for sure that this is what I wanted to do. And I was going to prove all those people who didn't vote for me wrong. And I was going to get them excited about voting for me the next time. And they did. And I won with 55% of the vote the second time.
That is spectacular.
But I also served with another state rep. Do you know how she became state rep? On a coin toss. Because it was an exact tie. When they were done counting all the votes, her versus her challenger, they both had an exact tie. They did a recount in the courts, and it was still an exact tie. So after doing the recount, and it was an exact tie, well, they can't have another election. So you know what they do by law? A coin toss in a court of law.
I did not know that.
And she picked the right, I don't know if it was heads or tails, but whatever she picked, probably tails, because tails never fails. That's what I say. But whatever she picked, she won on a coin toss. So imagine, like, your vote really does.
All because somebody stayed home.
Somebody stayed home.
Just one person.
Yeah. So thankfully, she turned out to be a good representative. I don't know who her opponent was. But my point is, we shouldn't leave it up to a coin toss. And even worse yet, like, we shouldn't leave it up to a coin toss that falls the wrong way, right? So we have the power. I would just ask people, please vote. You know, like, obviously, if I'm on the ballot, I would love for them to vote for me. But I want them to vote, period. Because you do have a constitutional right. And more so than a right, I think we should think of it as a duty as being Americans. You know, it's the least we can do to try to help out our fellow, you know, our neighbors, our fellow Americans, you know, people that we care about. You know, who you hire into these positions of power really matters. You either will feel represented or you won't. It's that simple. And you have a lot more power than you think you do. And once you start exerting that power, the people in the positions that you elected them to will be much more accountable to you.
I have one final question for you. Imagine it's your last day as Illinois Comptroller, and you can leave one confidential note for your successor. Not about policy, budgets, just a human advice. What would that note say?
Well, I don't have to imagine it, because I will be doing that on my last day when they come into the office. That there will be a note for them. And I won't tell you everything I'll say in the note, but one of the things that I will ask them is to always remember that while it is our job to manage the finances, and that requires looking at the many, many different numbers on many different spreadsheets, that we should remember to look at those numbers as not on numbers on a spreadsheet, but as the people behind those numbers. This is a job of caring for the people that we have the honor and privilege of representing. It's not about numbers. They're real human beings with real stories, real dreams, real hopes. And it's our job to protect them in the best way possible. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm probably going to cry when I'm writing that note, but I'm going to wish them the best and work with whoever the next controller is to have this be the best transition in the history of transitions.
I think this is a powerful place to end. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you for being so open and transparent.
Oh, for sure. See, I'm all about transparency. I love it. Thank you for having me. I guess now I get to go home and let me just say dziękuję. And I'm going to go home and say dai mi bushi to my honey and my little baby. Well, he's 12, but you know.
Susana, thank you again. It was great having you here.
Thanks for having me. Till the next time.
Till the next time. I want to thank Susana Mendoza again for coming to the studio and being so open about her family and her work. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to help the channel grow. I would also love to hear your thoughts on the topics we covered, so please leave a comment below. Thanks again for watching. I am Greg Czubernat, and I will see you in the next episode.